Okay, thank you very much and welcome to this event organized by the European Investment Bank Group, in particular by the European Investment Fund. I'm very happy to introduce this meeting. I am Gelsomina Vigliotti, the Vice President of the EIB, responsible for the activity in the EIF, together with the Vice President Ambroise Fayol, and I also chair the Board of Directors. So it's a real pleasure to me to have you tonight and to talk about the role of the private equity in promoting innovation and technologies. You may know that the EIB Group and the EIF at the forefront on climate. We decided back 3 years ago to finance at least 50% of our activities geared toward climate transition and to mobilize 1 trillion of euro of resources devoted to climate for 2030. It's ambitious targets, but we are very keen to achieve these targets. Also because this is a company, the Green Deal, which was decided by the European Commission 3 years ago, it was just before the COVID. Just before the COVID, and there was the identification of the two motors of growth in Europe that should have been the green and the digital. Something which goes together because we know that the technology and innovation can help to reduce, its energy absorption and also to find a solution which can support the trajectory towards climate neutrality. After that, we know what happened: COVID, so the Ukraine invasion by Russia, the energy crisis. And actually at that time within the EIB Group, there was an intense discussion about, how to keep our commitment in a moment in which all governments were looking for, approaching a new energy sources, also within the fossil area. But in the end, our decision was to continue to abide by our commitment, because in the end, to invest, long-term investment in energy, they take time. And investing at time when in 5 or 6 years, maybe the necessity was not there anymore, we didn't think that it was a good solution. And actually, our solution was to accelerate the process, to foster activities and investment. And in this regard, there were other programs by the Commission, and in particular with the REPowerEU, we accompanied the program by the Commission by increasing our activities devoted to energy by 45 billions, and actually by these 45 billions we aim to mobilize something like 150 million of new investment, covering almost what was requested by the program by the Commission. And actually out of these 45 million, 45 billion, 5 are on the EIF, which will add additional resources for investing in private equity and in venture capital to finance funds who can accelerate the process of making more renewable energies, in finding new technologies which can accelerate the process, and to invest in energy efficiency. Actually, these were 3 of the main drivers of the REPowerEU, and we are fully committed to follow this pattern. The EIF is moving, and also I would say, I dare to say that over the past few years, they are also changing their business approach, because actually green is becoming is a more relevant action on the side also of the EIF. And now it's a green, and the greening is becoming one of the KPI also for the institution. And so there is an important commitment, since we know that we have to mobilize private capital. The public resources will not be sufficient to achieve the goals that we have. And we have to find the way, the better solution to catalyze investment from the private sector. And in this regard, the EIF is providing also, is an important contribution within the European market also for the completion of the capital market union. We know that in Italy, in Europe, we are very much bank-centric on the financing to the real economy. We have to shift this pattern and to ensure that more savings flow to the real economy, and the effort by the EIF goes in that direction. This is just an introduction on the mega trend that we are following, but you will go through more in detail. Alessandro Tappi, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the EIF, will moderate this session. Thank you very much also to Elena Vignes for staying with us tonight. She's a very relevant person within the EU landscape in designing and improving also the regulatory environment that we need to improve the case for making more investment. And then Ambras Fayol will conclude this event. So thank you very much. Alessandro, please.
So EIF introduced. EIF has two business lines: guarantees for financing of SMEs and investments in equity. We're talking about the second leg of this business, equity, and here we have four panelists, all engaged in transition finance and green transition, and in their respective fields, really experts from a policy angle and from a practitioner investment angle. I'm pleased to introduce you with Elena Vignes Fiestas, who is chair of the EU Platform for Sustainable Finance, as well as the commissioner of the Spanish Financial Market Authority. Jonathan Maxwell, founder and CEO of Sustainable Development Capital. Pierre Abadi, Climate Director, Tikeo Capital. And Kai Rintala, Managing Director, Taleri Energia. Apologies for my pronunciations. Since 2021, the EIF has started looking at climate as a specific target for our business. I wouldn't say before we were not doing anything, but we didn't know. Since 2001, we have realized that it is a fundamental part of the business to focus specifically on these horizontal targets that cuts across all the sectors, and obviously it is very dear to the DNA of the EIF and of the people that work on that. More or less 30% of what we are doing today every year is now climate related, so contributes to positive effects on climate. The EIF is probably the largest fund of funds in Europe, certainly in the venture capital, and the large part of some segments of the private equity market. So we are an important player. But we do the business with our intermediaries. We do not invest directly. We need to work with the financial institutions, fund managers that do the work for us. And talking about green tech, we started investing already in 2006, the first investments in funds that were called clean tech at the time. And since then, there's been a huge development of the market, of the ecosystem, of the regulatory environment, and actually of the results, the awareness of the importance of this activity, and so forth. What comes now is particularly important. It comes to terms with reality, the fact that a lot of talks, now there's a need for concrete deliveries. And we have examples here of transitioning from a theoretical framework into a more pragmatic aspect. So my questions will start with Elena, on what is the EU platform for sustainable finance, so that we understand better the role of this within the transition finance.
Yes, thank you. And it's a real pleasure to be with all of you this afternoon. The EU platform on sustainable finance, can you hear me well? Yes. It's the advisor group to the European Commission on the development and implementation of the European taxonomy and the wider sustainable finance framework. I think what is important to understand is that the sustainable finance regulatory framework in Europe, it's really unique. Unique because it represents a whole strategy, right? It is not a list of regulations, but actually it works all the different, it's almost like a jigsaw, a big jigsaw, with the central piece being the taxonomy. And then all the rest of regulations have been drafted and crafted, around the taxonomy. So our number one goal is to develop the taxonomy, to support the implementation of the taxonomy. We work both on the development of the technical criteria as well as on the usability of the taxonomy, how the different users, for the different users, use the taxonomy. And then we look very much particularly at the consistency between the different regulations, between all those different puzzles of the jigsaw. And we are a multi-stakeholder group, so that's also very important because we are in a way like a mini Europe, if you wish, where we have representatives from all over Europe, from the different stakeholders, so from financial institutions, financial market participants, banks, the European Investment Bank, the European Investment Fund, but we also have academics, NGOs, and other representatives.
Thank you very much. Now to the general partners, your views on how you think your fund contributes to the transition elements in your activity of an investor.
So, can you hear me?
Yep.
Is that okay? Yeah. So Sustainable Development Capital has a point of view, which I think is really fundamental to the energy transition, and it aligns with the EU's policy on energy, which, although it was quiet between 2014 and 2022, became a huge amplification last year. And the policy is called energy efficiency first. Not second, tomorrow maybe, but energy efficiency first, because it's the largest, fastest, cheapest, cleanest source of greenhouse gas emission reductions, energy security, and competitiveness. So our investment thesis, investing in projects and supporting technologies that achieve energy efficiency, cutting carbon at scale, very much aligns with the energy transition. It happens to be stimulated by the advantage of being cost competitive and the advantage of being a remedy to energy security. But at the forefront, it's the most rapid, cheapest and largest route to decarbonization in Europe.
Indeed. I was looking at some numbers, the so-called tipping points. The fact that we are on the verge or have breached already quite a number of, say, important boundaries of the entire ecosystem of the planet. And these tipping points mean that sooner or later, when breached, we will not be able to restore the situation that we knew as it was before. So sustainability is a big word, but it is an even bigger challenge that we are facing with this. So Pierre, from energy to your recently launched fund, what is your contribution?
So within Tikehau Capital, we are an asset manager, so we are investing into mid-cap companies, private equity, so it's a growth buyout. So really we are there to finance the growth of company on this segment that is basically fastly growing in an economy that is not growing anymore. In reality, we are on a secular megatrend that is huge. And what we do is, on one side, we are defensive, as you are, which is basically reducing the carbon footprint of the economy. And what we try to achieve is to be very focused on short-term target, 2030, which means scaling up existing technology and working with the real economy to reduce the carbon footprint of the existing asset base. And it's mostly energy efficiency, building, industry, retail. It's mostly engineering company doing those type of work. Then we've got the global electrification, of course, because by shifting, a combustion engine by an electric engine or shifting a boiler of any kind from fossil to a heat pump, you are going to multiply by 4 the energy efficiency of it as well. And then there is the fulfillment of this new electricity demand by renewable. So that's one big pillar. In fact, you have been supporting us back in 2021 on the first fund, that is our decarbonization fund. And then we have launched another fund that was focused on shifting the way that we are producing our food, because the other big, I would say, pressure that we put on our environment is basically the way that we produce food. Just one statistic. Yeah? Us, human beings, we represent 0.01% of the biomass in mass. Okay, so you've got the living, which is mostly plants, mycelium, bacteria. Then you've got living that is more developed like ourselves. We represent 0.01%. We are currently using 50% of the habitable land to produce our own food. So this gives you, in a sense, what is the pressure that we put into our ecosystem. And the beauty of it is that if we partner with nature by trying to work with it instead of trying to extract resources for us, we can steer a bit the system. And here, by producing food the right way, ultimately one of the outcomes is to storing CO2 into the soil. So you had the Paris Agreement back in 2015, which set target for CO2. At the same time, you had another initiative that is called the 4 per 1,000 initiative that was from INRAE, that shows that basically if you store 0.4% of carbon into the soil on a yearly basis, you are able to draw down the same amount of CO2 that our economy is emitting. So we are working on those two balances. How do we reduce our carbon footprint on one side, and how we draw down the carbon from shifting the way that we are producing our food on the other side? And that's another fund. So the first layer of impact for us is the size. We try to make funds that are multi-billion funds, to invest several hundreds of millions into companies that are basically will be the leading platform. And we do that in Europe because this is the place, in reality, to be when it comes to this transitional space, because we've got no other choice. We are very, I would say, short of fossil fuel in a world where we are depending on a partner that we don't like at all. So therefore, we had to shift, Repower EU, but we have to shift our food because we have to think that the food is also coming from fossil fuel.
Thank you, Pierre. Now, from the energy production and the regenerative agri into what Kai's fund does?
The model is fairly simple. So we do wind generation, onshore wind, photovoltaic solar, and battery storage, and we go in at the early stage, develop projects, get them to construction, make them operational, then and eventually exit them, and then we do so in Europe, 80%, 20% US, but out of the overall allocation, we are approximately 50% on the Eastern European side, which is where the big impact then comes. That, for example, from the previous funds, we've done one wind farm in Norway and one wind farm in Serbia. And given that Norway does most of the electricity with hydro and Serbia with lignite and black coal, then the impact on the environment of the Serbian wind farm is 30 times larger than the one that we built in Norway. So it is being on certain geographies where the black coal and lignite is still being burned for electricity that makes the biggest impact for us.
Thank you. So quite a variety of different angles to look at how we can help the transition to a greener planet. Now back to the policy aspects. Helena, can you explain what the role of the transition finance under the different pieces of the EU sustainable finance framework is? And maybe with an example, tell us how it works, and is there anything we should expect coming soon?
Okay, those are 3 questions, but I'll go one by one. So as I was explaining before, I I personally see the sustainable finance package as a jigsaw, right? This big jigsaw with the taxonomy at the very center. So this jigsaw already includes or integrates transition finance. That doesn't mean that we don't have to reinforce the transition component of the sustainable finance framework. But let me give you an example, a concrete example. I think it's going to be much more tangible on seeing how the different pieces of the jigsaw are put together. So let's imagine there is an utility company with, let's say, 4 power generation plants. To make it very simple, we'll say that each plant of that company generates 25% of the revenues of the company. Now, I am the CEO of the company. I'm very conscious about, the overall policy framework in Europe. I am committed to reach net zero way before 2050, so I'm starting to develop my transition plan. So the first thing I would do is I'm going to take the taxonomy, I'm going to look at the criteria to comply with the taxonomy for power generation, and I'm going to look at each one of my plants and see the extent to which they might meet my criteria. And let's imagine only one of my plants meets the criteria. That means that I am 25% taxonomy aligned from a revenue perspective. But as I said, I am developing my transition plan. So then I make an estimate of how much of an investment it would require to become taxonomy aligned, that means to meet the criteria of the taxonomy. And at the same time, I am going to commission a physical risk assessment of all my plants. Once that assessment is done, they tell me that my 4th plant, it's in a flood risk area, and therefore I need to invest in upgrading, putting in place the measures for that plant to be adapted. And let's say that I start with my first plan and say, okay, during the next 5 years, I'm going to concentrate on my plant B, and I'm going to adapt my 4th plant, and then I'm going to set targets for my 3rd plant and my 4th plant in terms of meeting the technical criteria for later on. And that's how I develop my transition plan. Now, that means I estimate X amount, X amount of euros, and then that represents roughly 75% of my capex. Now, every year I'm going to have to report the percentage of my capex that is aligned with the taxonomy. That means that is going to be invested, in this case, to transform my 2nd plant. Now, why is this so important? This is very important because, A, I can then go with my capex plan to the bank, to the EIB, and say, look, I would like, or any bank, I would like to issue a green bond, right, for investing for my capex plan and to both adapt my plant and transform my plant B. That bond, I'm going to try to make it in a way that meets the criteria of the EU Green Bond Standard, and obviously it's going to be taxonomy aligned. That gives me that stamp, and we all know what a huge demand, green bonds have, and increasing demand. We can have a debate about whether or not exists a greenium in the primary markets, but what is clear is that the demand is really high. I can also go to my bank and ask a series of green loans, but it goes farther, and this is what is very unique about the whole, jigsaw, is that from now on, each one of my shares, equity, and general purpose bonds is going to have 2 figures attached to them. On one hand, the 25% of the revenues, on the other hand, the 75%. And why is that important? It's because financial market participants can use those figures to create their portfolios. They can use a portfolio to be green already, revenues, or a transition fund. They can even go farther and look at my transition plan and say, okay, that's the investment, the alignment, and that's the transition plan. Why is that also important? It's because they are obliged as well to report on the taxonomy alignment based on revenues and capex for all the financial products that they commercialize, that they promote environmental characteristics or a sustainable investment objective. And guess what? Today in Europe, that's 56% of the market. market. On top of it, banks and financial institutions, financial market participants, they need to report the taxonomy alignment also at entity level. So you can start imagining how that, supply and demand is being created. And all these financial market participants want to increase their percentage of taxonomy alignment, whether it's revenue or CapEx, because at the end of the day, that's the figures that their clients are going to see. And now for the very first time in Europe, we can compare apples to apples. One fund is 50% aligned, the other one is 40% aligned. And I'm going to finish by saying, for the very first time, and for the time being, we only have the first year reporting from the largest corporates in Europe. And guess what? The figures are really telling. A, they're higher than we expected. B, the higher ones are in CapEx, and particularly in the high emitting sectors, in energy, utilities, construction, real estate, and automobile. And most of those figures in CapEx are investments in becoming taxonomy aligned. And that's how we integrate, the transition within the sustainable finance framework.
Thank you very much. The next question on what comes next will be in 1 minute. I would say, simplifying the word at the extreme, we got a fairly complex explanation, which means that there's something that needs to be somehow well understood by everybody here. So leaving aside the reporting challenges, what are the main challenges that UGPs see in your investment activity in order to accelerate the climate-related investments? And may I ask Kai to start with?
As in from our perspective, then there's really two things. One is across Europe and US the same, which is grid. There is naturally just not enough grid connection capacity around, and that's limiting the amount of generation capacity that we can put onto the networks. Battery storage is clearly helping there, but building more grid is still going to be necessary. The other thing is the permitting side of things. So development is not easy, and best development timelines in the US are maybe 2+ years, whereas in my home market in Finland, if you get through 5 years, you consider that you've done extremely well. And there's room for initiatives that digitalization, one single permitting authority, and more work ought to be done in these areas in order to streamline the process. But development will always take time, because we live in democracies, and people will need to be heard on their views on energy projects. But given that these are challenges for people like us, there are also opportunities, because then we know how to navigate them, and that's why people invest with us.
Thank you, Kai. Pierre?
Yes, so on my side, I would say that it's more a change of software or an upgrade of the institutional finance that we need to put in place. When you launch a strategy that is basically supporting the transition, per construction you are transitioning, so you are going from point A to point B, and per construction is likely to be new. So I would say that most of the players that are active today are people that are launching new strategies, and as we all know, institutional, they don't like new strategies, and most of their risk department will just have a tick in the box, is it like a first-time fund? So if you want to finance the transition at scale, at some point, the people that are in charge of those big institutions, beyond just the pledge of trying to reduce the CO2 emission by 2050 by organizing plenty of net zero pathway, need to change the way that they look at the risk, accept that perhaps the first physical risk that their portfolio is about to face is the climate risk, and most of the people haven't done properly their homework perhaps on their portfolio, but also acknowledge that certainly the first opportunity to hedge this risk is to invest into the transition itself. And to do so, you have to accept the first time. So then I fully understand that there are plenty of hurdles to overcome. The first one is it's new, so therefore you've got no track. So on our side, how do we do to overcome those? Is we seek for first aligning our interests. So as you know, TKO has got a strong balance sheet. We've got nearly 3 billion of balance sheet, and we are owned by our own partners. So we are 60% owned by ourselves. So we are the biggest LP of any of our fund, meaning that the partner of the firm are the biggest LP of the fund, which somewhat align the interest. Then we always look at corporate partnership. We are going to work on big value chains, so we try to go to someone that is relevant on this value chain, because changing the real world is working with the people of the real world. And then we seek for institutional partnership that we develop with you, for example, when we've got EIF or the French BPI entering very early in the process. We know that somewhat that will straighten and tighten all the bolt of what is a fund, because we will have a very strong documentation, etc. And then we try to have partnership as well with institutional finance. So which means that let's say that a fund that is impactful for our perspective is a fund that is a 1 billion euro fund on a theme. When you've done that, usually we invest 200 million of our own balance sheet. We've got 200 million coming from a corporate. We've got 200 million coming from the sovereign. And then we've got 200 million coming from institutional finance. And you are already halfway. And when you're halfway, then the market starts to believe that it will work. And then I would say that's all the hurdle that we face. But I would say that if we want to accelerate, at some point, everyone needs to do the same as you did, looking at the market in a thematic way, rather than per asset class, and just looking at the economical risk of a company, since the main risk is certainly now climate.
Building track record. What else, Jonathan?
The problem we're trying to solve, we like problems because that's what business is about, solving them. But the problem we're trying to solve is this conundrum that loads of energy is wasted before it gets to the point of use, and then more, is wasted there. And really, the biggest challenge lies in that, which is that we're solving problems for customers. So each time you go to a data center or a hospital or in a university or some sort of building, typically it's a project which shares something in common. It might be an on-site generation, it might be demand reduction, but you're solving a problem for a specific customer in a specific location. So I think that's the biggest challenge that we face, and it's how to more rapidly process the information to get to a concept which can be put in front of a client to deliver a solution. But I think that's getting better. I think there's better technology, there's better supply chain. I think there's better methods to do that these days. And I also think the projects are getting bigger because there are a lot of very energy hungry and therefore energy intense counterparties for us to deal with, whether it's data centers or industrial facilities that might need 50 or 100 megawatts of energy. These are sort of areas where we can make a big difference. So I think the biggest challenge is also the biggest opportunity.
So let's look at the future for a second. What can we expect?
Can you hear me well? Yes. In terms of regulation, there are only 2 pieces of regulation that are being negotiated as we speak, and I think that will, sort of close the sustainable finance package. That's the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive and the ESG ratings. Basically, the latter looks at enhancing transparency and dealing with conflicts of interest and so forth. So it is more as a principle base, if you wish. And then the directive, the due diligence directive, I think, in my personal opinion, has one article that is critical. It's Article 15, which basically asks companies to not only report on a transition plan, but actually to develop and implement. So it is very important because it would move from reporting regulation to actually behavioral regulation, and not no matter which type of transition plan, but one transition plan that is aligned with 1.5. In terms of the platform, what we are working on is, number one, simplification and increasing the consistency. I was talking before that the sustainable finance framework, it is like a jigsaw. Well, we need to understand that each piece of the puzzle has been developed separately. That means that now, when we try to put them together, well, sometimes they didn't fit, fully. So we need to polish them so they fit, well. And that is quite a lot of work in a sense, but we are improving there. We're doing a lot of work on consistency around the sustainability reporting standards for corporates, for financial market participants, for financial institutions, banks, the taxonomy, the benchmarks regulation, and so forth. What we're also looking at is at how can we now start deepening our knowledge and adjusting the regulation for what we call the special cases. And I think this is particularly important for this audience. First and foremost for SMEs. I think that we all recognize that the framework was done for the largest corporates, right? But we also want to really enhance and provide the tools for those SMEs that want to access green finance. So what we're working on is on a simplified framework that will really reduce the type of indicators, always from a voluntary perspective, also of the taxonomy for the largest within the SMEs, the high impact, and those that we call enablers. That is, those SMEs that develop the products, services, and technologies that are necessary for the transition. We're also looking at a simplified approach for investments in developing countries and seeing how we can, we need to ensure that the framework cannot be a barrier for the investments where they're most needed. And last but not least, one of the things that has really emerged from all the work we've done is that need for consistency goes beyond the sustainable finance framework. What we're seeing is that there are other inconsistencies within the broader policy in Europe. For example, the reporting requirements might be, contradict procurement requirements, right? So we need to align. We're also realizing that when you start implementing the taxonomy, we realize that there've been quite a lot of difference between different European countries, how they have transposed some directives, for example, on the energy efficiency or the energy performance certificates. So maybe to really apply the taxonomy, we need one standard, so we need to review that directive. And the last point, and I think it's very important, is we're really looking at data and databases. And that's not only in terms of corporates and also to improve, the estimates methodology, but also what about all the environmental data that is available in Europe, all spread in different forms by different stakeholders, and mostly municipalities, governments, nationalities. How can we start creating a unified database of environmental information to really facilitate the access of financial institutions to that information so they can apply the taxonomy and other pieces of the jigsaw?
Thank you very much. So consolidation, simplification, polishing.
Consistency, a lot of work.
And all together. Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to have had this panel. I think it was very insightful. So let's give it an applause. And then we have a second part of this event, which is a signing event with 4 funds. 2 are physically present here. It's, again, Jonathan and Pierre. But there are also 2 funds that are, hopefully, connected remotely. And these are Get Fund and Set Fund, with Isabel Kanu, Martin Kroner, Till Stenzel, that should be online. So I'm looking for only one. Okay, so we have one. So let's give the floor immediately. Let's start with Isabel Kanu and Martin to present their fund. Okay, so we have one. So Isabel? Let's start with... No? Isabel Kanu and Martin... So the floor is yours.
But unfortunately, Martin is not in there material. I think it's better. Yeah. You hear me?
Okay, not very well, but the sound is not great, but we hear you. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you.
Please.
Oh, there is a huge delay between you and us.
Okay, not very well, but sound is not great, but we hear you.
Martin, you should start.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. I'm sorry for the delay. We had some technical issues. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to be part of that. Okay, so now again with microphone, I'm sorry. Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to get the opportunity to present the GET Fund today and be part of that event. The GET team has been managing clean tech venture capital investments for more than a decade now. As an investor in the predecessor fund, the EIF was helping us creating a successful clean tech ecosystem in the recent years already. And together we showed that impact and financial returns are not contradictory, but can be achieved at the same time. In the GET team, we firmly believe that only scalable solutions will have a major impact. Without scaling, no real impact, right? With our focus on hybrid hardware software solutions, we support exactly those startups that can scale quickly and therefore have the greatest impact potential on our path to a more sustainable society. With the GET Fund, therefore, we want to actively drive an eco-industrial revolution. Isabel. Looks like Isabel has a delay, or is it on my end?
Yes, thank you. It's so crucial for us and for our fundraising to have the EIF as a cornerstone investor. The market appreciates the EIF due diligence and commitment as a very strong signal. The green tech team of EIF is shaping the new asset class of impact venture capital, especially the assessment and tracking of the environmental impact. At GET Fund, we measure impact along the triple top line. The triple top line is a science-based tool that relies on a holistic and strategic approach of sustainability to balance economy, ecology, and social equity. We support our portfolio companies to define the strategic factors required to develop a sustainable business model. We are happy and honored to contribute together with the EIF to the shaping of impact investing and hopefully make it the new normal. Thank you and EIF for the strong support.
Very much. SET Fund is the other fund that is online. So Till, floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. And I hope my technology holds up while I'm speaking. So thank you very much to give us the opportunity to present the SET Ventures here as well. We are a venture fund based in Amsterdam in the Netherlands and in Hamburg, Germany, with a 15-year track record in the energy transition and investing over 4 fund generations into leading companies that have shaped the clean energy revolution in Europe. Our fund is very much based on the belief that we don't have to wait for science and engineering breakthroughs to build the carbon-free energy system of the future. We're very much focused on innovative business models, data-driven solutions and platforms that allow us today to build the interconnected energy system, the smart energy system, the balanced and managed energy system of the future. And we are looking constantly for innovative entrepreneurs in the ecosystem to drive that energy transition. So we are also very thankful to EIF for their continued support. We see EIF absolutely as a leading investor in the space in Europe. And indeed, EIF has been a partner of ours over 3 funds. So first investing in the SET Fund 2 and then continuing and expanding that partnership over time. And it's not only capital that is crucial from what EIF provides, but it's also the content and the insights that EIF drives in this ecosystem. So we've been glad to partner with you on topics such as ESG, risk measurement, impact measurement, and indeed have laid the foundation for what I think now is codified in the EU SFDR regulation, but which EIF has really intellectually driven for many years already prior to that regulation coming into force. So thank you very much, and we look forward to the event with you.
Thank you, Till. And I think now we can proceed with this virtual signature. Gelsomina. There's a certified copy that will be kept in the files.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next one, Pierre. And there's one more. Jonathan, please. So this demonstration that technology goes together with green transformation, and we badly need technology. If we had teleportation, would have been easier, but we are still working on it. Thank you very much. And now I would like to give the floor to Ambroise Fayol, Vice President of DAB, for closing remarks of this event.
I am in the worst position, so the best thing I can do is to be extremely brief. And there are two things that I would like to tell you. First, one word for the EIF team. EIF is part of the EIB group, and the climate strategy of the EIB group, the climate macro roadmap, includes a significant part that is EIF's one. And I must say that I am very impressed by the way the EIF, because it is not necessarily easy for EIF, has endorsed this strategy and included in a significant part of its activity. So well done, and please, Alessandro, convey the thanks of the board of EIF, the board of EIB, and all the management of the EIB to the staff of EIF for that. The second thing I wanted to say is I found the panel extremely interesting. The combination also of regulation and funds was very interesting. What I found particularly important was that you have presented to us positive stories that involve climate change and climate and environment, not only climate actually. And I think what we need is you to develop this and probably us to convey this message that climate change is not only constraint and drama, that it is also positive stories about change, scaling, and benefit for the society. So for that, I thank you very much, because we need these kind of stories. We need having a narrative that is a positive narrative about climate change. And you contribute to that, and for that I thank you very much.
And with this, with all my thanks, we close the session.